Good evening. Welcome to the Toronto Debating Society. Tonight is November the 5th, 2013. This is a regular style debate. The resolution is Internet vigilantism does more harm than good. The first speaker is the Prime Minister, Dean, who will speak to us for 7 minutes. Please welcome Dean.
Ladies and gentlemen, the debate before us this evening is that Internet vigilantism does more harm than good. We define Internet vigilantism as self-appointed people who summarily or quickly suppress and punish crime to get justice via the World Wide Web. Does more harm than good means result of their action causes more suffering for all concerned. My partner and I on the government will argue different points. I will argue 3 points, and my partner will argue his points, which I will explain shortly. Firstly, I'd like to state that the Internet is forever. Second point for us, no opportunity for opposing points of view to be presented. And the third point is a reflection period versus the mob mentality. My partner will talk about respecting people's rights, using the Internet by police to capture criminals, and the accountability of Internet vigilantes. So to start out with, the Internet is forever. Picture your Facebook page. And imagine that you now pass away and there's no more you to update it. But your images stay on there forever. And only recently have they been able to force Facebook to take accounts down. They've been up there in limbo forever. So this is what happens when Internet vigilantes make comments about criminals, about people in general, politicians that they don't agree with, that they're trying to change, or trying to get charged with a crime. Now, the Boston bombing that happened recently, it was discovered that there were 2 suspects, and they caused the bombing, and one died and one escaped. In fact, 2 other suspects were picked up and were actually highlighted as bagmen with the backpacks by the New York Post on their front page on the Internet 3 days after the bombing. These 2 men, Yassine Zaimi Salah and Eden Barhoum, were actually watching the marathon happen. They weren't involved in the bombing. They were just students. But even now, if you type them in, you see them as the bombing suspects. Now imagine if you're one of them going to school, dealing with people who aren't familiar with what's actually happening, but they've heard your name in the context of the Boston bombings, and they've already got a picture in their heads of who you are and what happened. This is extremely difficult to fight. How do you fight that? It's an ether, and there's no way to say, oh, well, that's not me, that wasn't me, there was a mistake made. You don't have the New York Post's webpage fan base. So the issues are that the web says one thing and it keeps it out there pretty much forever. And vigilantes, because they're so fast to act, and like the opposition members you're going to hear from shortly, they're not known for long, adequate research to actually find out what's right or true, just what sounds or feels good in the moment to resolve a perceived wrong. So remember that when they're talking about their points. Secondly, there's no following along this, there's no opportunity for opposing points of view to be presented. In the criminal justice system, the police arrest suspects, they charge suspects, they go through the judicial system, lawyers, prosecutors, judges, courtrooms, juries, whatever. That's the process that's followed. Yes, it takes a long time, but that ensures that it is fair, because those who are not guilty need to be shown as not guilty. Those who are guilty will be found so and punished so. Vigilantes, on the other hand, are judge, jury, and executioner all in one fell swoop. And what happens if you're not aware that you're being badmouthed on the internet? You're convicted of some nefarious deed you're not even aware of, that you're not responsible for. How do you respond to that? Who do you talk to? Who do you contact? The police may not be able to shut the site down, and it's out there anyway. People know. Bad rumors, as you may know from small towns, follow you around, and you get a reputation that's twice as hard to fix as it was when you had a good reputation. And on the internet, you may have to fight against hours, weeks, months, or even years that this article has gotten time to get currency throughout the world or the people reading the particular article. It also presumes guilt when the vigilantes are there. They assume that you're guilty. And it's almost a revenge versus a justice issue. I feel bad. I want to feel better. I'm going to make you feel bad. I don't care if you're actually guilty, but I'm going to feel better making you suffer. And expectations in this are driven very quickly in the speed of the internet. And vigilantism isn't like the Crime Stoppers, where an anonymous person says, by the way, I think I saw somebody do this, where the police are involved, they do the investigation. Anonymous is, he did it, get him. Lastly, reflection period versus mob mentality, or act now, ask questions later. Cases progress and new facts come to light that may change what the police or the judiciary know about that. Now, crowdsourcing is a fantastic way to help the police find suspects or other people, but be careful. Instead of having one or two wrong opinions, you can end up with 1,000 wrong opinions. And again, it's very hard to quell that. So the issue, just one quick last thought. I'm going to leave you. Joss Wright from the Oxford Internet Institute says, for example, the anonymous group, they're anonymous, unaccountable, they censor websites in response to positions with which they agree, and there's no way to control them. They've made the decision, and it's very difficult for you to get back from it. Ladies and gentlemen, for this reason, internet vigilantism does more harm than good.
The next speaker is the leader of the opposition, Adrian H., who will speak for 7 minutes. Please help me welcome Adrian.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The government has put forward some arguments which, to be honest, deserve the revenge of the internet to come down on them and banish them forever as a testament and a monument to how silly they are. However, that being the case, we are going to firmly rebut what the government has said and bring forth some new arguments as to why the resolution should fail or should not be supported. The resolution, the result of the action, causes more suffering for all concerned. And the opposition takes great offense to all concerned. That's a pretty broad term, and the government would have you believe that the three little cases, or the cases that they've mentioned, is somewhat indicative of the entire internet, that the entire internet world is composed of the examples which they have given, and they're not providing any examples, of course, that prove the opposite. And that is the job that the opposition is going to do, and that is the job which we're going to do right now. First of all, we'll start with our second point. No opportunity for opposing viewpoints. Well, the same speed in which the government says that the internet can rise up against someone is exactly the same speed that the internet can rise up for someone, to advocate for a view, to advocate when something is wrong. For example, in the case of the Boston bombing, for example, what the government hasn't told you was that when the website Reddit realized that it had made a mistake in identifying these people which had no idea, which had no interest at all in the Boston bombing, they quickly motivated and moved their membership to issue the corrections. They actually raised money for the families. They actually posted an apology. The internet isn't forever, and it isn't forever for just one particular viewpoint. It is forever for a whole bunch of viewpoints some which can do exactly the opposite which the government is saying. So it isn't forever. First of all, I mean, it isn't forever. I mean, that's why the 2 points we think are almost the same. It's not forever. And even if the negative things are forever, which we don't believe they are, they can be counteracted by positive things which can be said in the exact same form. The third point which the government made was that there is no reflection period. There's no time to reflect. The problem, though, sometimes is that people tend to reflect a bit too long. The problem is that people may reflect and not do anything at all when the situation desperately calls for someone to do something. For example, no one would reflect upon, say, a YouTube video of someone torturing a cat, for example. The government would have you say, well, we should just reflect on that and let the cat be, tortured indefinitely. Or no one would reflect on other wrongdoings, for example. We should just reflect on that. What the government fails to mention is the fact that sometimes the things which internet vigilantism deals with are things which should not be reflected on. Serious crimes, serious actions against other people, against animals, against property, things which in the past society would be able to say, well, no, we're not going to get involved in that sort of thing because we don't want to get our hands dirty. Now, people are getting involved. People are getting involved. People are calling the police. People are expressing their outrage. People are acting as a global village, making sure that society isn't doing things which it seems as wrong or unjust or cruel. Now, the government has sort of said, well, has given all these reasons as to why it's bad and why it causes suffering for all concerned, and we've tried to rebut those by the three reasons we've given above. But as for our new arguments, what happens if the crimes that are being done are not being done by individuals, but are being done by the state? Who guards the guards, so to speak? Who ensures, or who has the ability, who has the power to ensure that when state governments, or when governments such as the government of Canada, such as the National Security Agency, for example, such as the CIA or other intelligence agencies, when they do crimes, how do we get them to acknowledge what they're doing is wrong? How do we put the public light on them? Well, we can't just go and call up the NSA and say, well, you know what? I think you're spying on me, and you're not really allowed to do that under American law, for example. So I want you to stop it. The government would laugh in your face. Or if you say, for example, well, I think the government's engaged in a cover-up and it's breaking their laws on their own books, and say in terms of environmental waste, for example. They're not going to admit to that. And why aren't they going to admit to that? Because the government has the monopoly of power, the monopoly of police, the monopoly of intelligence agencies, the monopoly of force, say, for example, with the army. And how does someone get the government to admit that they have done wrong unless they can shine a public light on those issues? And for the most part, that public light isn't able to be shone on by individuals who are working alone. What is needed, and which the government doesn't mention, is the fact that you need people who have the ability to expose the government using the internet, to expose the government for the crimes and the wrongs that they are doing. So to say that this action causes more suffering for all concerned is a bit too broad. In fact, it is too broad, and it is wrong. The amount of discussion that is being occurred, for example, in regards to the Edward Snowden case, for example, shows that internet vigilantism, where the crime being perpetrated is on the government side, actually causes a lot of good. It causes a lot of change. It causes a lot of things to be beneficial for a lot of people. And for all of these reasons, we believe that the resolution today should be defeated. Thank you.
The next speaker is the government seconder, Adrian D., who will speak for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The motion before you tonight is that internet vigilantism does more harm than good. I'm going to start off by doing some rebuttals and explain some of the stuff that the opposition spoke, and then I'm going to introduce some new arguments. I know he was talking about no opportunities for reviews, and rise up against about wrongs and stuff. But what I think too is that internet vigilantism does not always allow for views. That it doesn't allow you to talk to the people who do the wrongs beforehand, or talk to the victims. Well, he says forever is not really forever. We do think that it's like that. Also, too, there's no reflection for people to reflect. Is reflects too long. We disagree. We believe that it is appropriate, that you have to have a process and a procedure and a way of doing it. You just don't go all out, ready, aim, fire, and attack somebody. You got to have a process and procedures and mechanisms to do that. You also talked about crimes by the state and the government and stuff. There is the RCMP. Even the government employees are employees of the government. They have managers and people that they have to listen to and be accountable to. Even too, there is Interpol, which works between the different governments, and to make sure that the government people are following it too. Okay, I'm now going to do some new arguments. My first argument, actually what I'm going to do is Dean just talked about the intangibles. So I'm going to focus more on intangibles. My first argument is that internet vigilantes may not respect people's rights and assure that a process is followed. So, there's kind of like I was talking earlier about some of the views and stuff, that there is no right to fair trial guarantee. You don't take the rights of the accused or a victim impact agent or the victim side. Even Miranda rights, like arresting a person and what you have to do. There isn't much of that in a vigilante, as it is just all out and try to do it. My second point is the internet vigilante versus police. So there is even like sexual predators and stuff. The police are very effective in trying to catch many of the people. That we don't need vigilantes that much. That they're able to catch sexual predators. That they go on the internet and they pretend to be little kids, and then they try to have an encounter with somebody who's a predator. Then they meet them and they find them and they arrest them. There's even child pornography, where you have people who go on the internet and download porn, and there's a lot of good policing there. Even too, there was a court case called Regina versus Sharp, in which John Robin Sharp was caught downloading some pictures and videos of some children, and there was much debate about freedom of expression and freedom of thought, and so that kind of shows that too. Psycho-Napster, that it was used for downloading music, and had problems with the internet and music. And my point is that internet vigilantes cannot be held accountable for their actions. Only police can. That the police are identified by their badge and their name type. That there is a justice of the peace. That they can be suspended, and so there are many mechanisms to enforce it. Even too, at the G20 summit, there are many police officers, and some of them were charged and they were identified through photographs. Is what happened there. That concludes my statement. Please vote for the motion. Thank you.
The next speaker is Adi, the opposition seconder, who will speak for 5 minutes. Please help me welcome Adi.
Net is forever. Rebuttal. Net is forever. Media is forever. People's memories are not. How many of you remember what you posted 3 years ago on your Facebook page as a response, as an impulsive response to what something your friend has said? I don't think anybody remembers. The words may be there, digitally or physically. We could today go to New York Public Library and pick up an old newspaper. So this is not specific to internet. People's memories are short term. They will not remember exactly your face or your name. So this claim that it is there forever and scar is there forever does not hold much water. Boston bombings. Rebuttal. 15th April 2003, the bombings took place. 19th April 2013, Joker Sarne was caught by the police. Less than 4 days. Okay. Parallelly, there was the Reddit meme going on as to who were the true bombers. People were speculating things on the basis of photographs. Millions of photographs. But I don't think FBI or the Boston police actually went on the Reddit meme and checked out, oh, what are these common people talking about? Let's pick up these people. And if the New York Post revealed 2 wrong suspects, this is highly against the New York Post as the media, as a credible source of information. Internet vigilantes did not provide to New York Post. They should have a proper editing process and they are responsible for putting out information for millions of readers who consider them to be a credible source. And as the government seconder said, internet vigilantism cannot be held accountable. Of course, nobody is holding internet vigilantism accountable. It is, after all, the due process, the authorities at place that actually confer punishment. Internet vigilantes may summarily suppress or punish crimes, but what kind of crimes are we talking about here? We are not talking about murders, we are not talking about felonies. It's mostly some small scale crimes, misdemeanors that take place in the society. Let's say if somebody's dog is littering the place of a neighbor and the person is not picking up the matter. In that case, a quick video that is posted online can actually bring to notice that this is what could happen and you need to take responsibility for your actions. You live in the society. Now, some of my points which I would like to supplement with my leader is internet vigilantism has done more good than harm. My leader has already given a very excellent example of Edward Snowden. This is in what happens if the lawmakers become lawbreakers. Who do we turn to? I believe the United States had in Constitution the right to bear arms originally because in case if your state itself turns around you, you have to have something to protect. That was the original thought of the forefathers. Internet vigilantism has given you an excellent tool today to bring out the crimes committed by the law holders, the lawmakers. Some more examples that come to mind here is the Arab Spring 2 years ago. The whole movement that completely changed the whole state. That was assisted by internet vigilantism. Second, in ever-growing communities like today, we have a lack of authorities or presence of authorities everywhere. So, internet vigilantism is something that can greatly supplement the main authorities, the mainstream authorities, and help in improving the society. There are some more examples that I'd like to give is the Draconian Internet Act, that SOPA, which the US government was going to levy, that was shut down by internet vigilantism. Anonymous is a very big internet vigilantism group that has revealed or uncovered a lot of child pornography rings, that has uncovered so many pedophiles and assisted the police in catching these pedophiles. Internet vigilantism has definitely done much more good than harm in the society. Thank you.
And now the leader of the opposition, Adrian H., will present his summation. Please help me welcome Adrian.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. In summation, the government has tried to make a case, and we believe it has failed, that internet vigilantism is overall a bad thing, that it causes more suffering for all concerned. And we in the opposition believe that, quite frankly, it does not. We have provided concrete examples in terms of both, say, illegal espionage by intelligence agencies, in terms of catching child pornographers, in terms of animal torture, in terms of minor misdemeanors, for example, things which society believes are wrong. We have proven, I believe, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that internet vigilantism does not cause suffering for all, that in many cases it ends suffering. In many cases it prevents harm from being done over and over again. It prevents bad things from being continued. And because of that, we believe that the government has not made a case that internet vigilantism is bad for all concerned or causes more suffering for all concerned. In terms of, just to end, the good of the many outweighs the good of the few or the one. And that was said by a wise person, Spock in Star Trek, but it still holds in this case that, on the whole, on a concrete overall level, internet vigilantism has ended more suffering than it has caused. And so for all of these reasons, we believe that the motion should be opposed. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Now, for the next 2 minutes, we're going to hear about the Prime Minister's summation. D.
Madam Speaker, the government side has been clear. We have stated that the internet is forever, contrary to the opposition's suppositions. There are ways that the information sticks around, and incorrect information sticks around, and information from vigilantes trying to get justice or revenge in their case, it sticks around and can hurt people into the future. It does not offer an opportunity for opposing points. If you keep reading the same websites, you're not going to be seeing contrary points of view, as the opposition is suggesting. You're going to see what you see, and it's going to reinforce what you see, and an opposite perspective will not be presented. In a court of law, where there's a prosecutor and a defendant, those points of view will be shown and listened to and used for judgment. The reflection period versus the mob mentality, or the act now, ask questions later. There is a chance with the police, with the non-internet setup and non-vigilantism, to reflect and think about the process of the legal system and confirm facts before acting. This is not always the case with internet vigilantism, and people act first and think later. We have said it may not respect people's rights. We're throwing you our perspective. We don't care about what the right perspective might be, says the internet vigilante. Police use the internet to capture criminals, and they do it internationally, whether it is child pornography or international criminals. And police are held accountable for their actions. Internet vigilantes are not. Please vote for the motion.
Very good. Tonight our adjudicator is Dave, who will speak for 7 minutes. Please help me welcome Dave.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Well, I was looking forward to this debate. It's a great topic, and I was really excited to see what the different sides would come up with, and I wasn't disappointed. There was a lot of interesting points, interesting discussion, and so there was, it definitely met my needs there, but I'm going to go through and break down the debate and see how each side did. So first of all, about the argument. The Prime Minister came right out of the gate and set up this beautiful structure. I'm going to talk about these points, and my opposition seconder is going to talk about these points, and it was wonderful, and I couldn't wait to hear that get filled in. And unfortunately, for all of the arguments that the government came up with, I wasn't quite sure if they really attacked the meat of the issue about the punishment and the cause of harm. Like, the arguments all fit well together, and they did work, talking about internet's forever, no opportunity for opposition views, no there's a mob mentality, and I really didn't get those concrete, solid examples of why internet is forever is really harmful and where that punishment is coming from. And actually, I'll make this point now. I thought a lot of the really strong points, the meat, the crux of this debate, they all happened at the last minute of everyone's speech. I heard Arab Spring in the last minute of the opposition seconder's speech. I heard G20 in the last minute of the government seconder's speech. Like, these are all the things I wanted to hear about. I got to hear them, but they're all so late. It was like an afterthought, when this is what I thought the debate is really about. And like, the opening was just about Facebook being forever, so it didn't really grab my attention there, and I wasn't sure where that was coming from. And I'll move again over to the government seconder's also argument development points. I also thought that the relevance of them didn't quite connect either to what your leader was saying or to the definition. So they were there, and they were definitely put through in exactly the order that your leader said they were going to, but I was having difficulty connecting them to the harm and the suffering and really trying to defend the case that your government is trying to do.
Well, I did mention too that...
comments at the pub. Over to the opposition. I'll talk about rebuttals in a minute, but the leader of the opposition, I think I only got 1 point out of you, and that again speaks to the delay of getting the real new meat. We talked about crimes by the state. You said NSA, CIA shines a public light on issues, and I was getting ready to write down Egypt and Arab Spring. I was getting ready to write down the point that your seconder brought up, but you didn't say it, and I was amazed. I thought, crimes by the state, I thought this is going to be about Arab Spring and shutting down the internet, and this is going to be about people circumventing it, and I didn't hear it, and it was such a glaring omission. I had to deduct points there. So for argument development, not much there from the leader of the opposition. In contrast, the seconder for the opposition did have a lot of arguments that actually spoke directly to the definition and to the case the way it is. Your first point was there's more good than harm, and you talked about the Arab Spring, and I'm thinking, finally, this is what I want the debate to be about, and it's actually connecting. And you had a point that you were talking about supplementing mainstream authorities, and you didn't actually mention about how that connected directly with something that the other side said. When the seconder for the government mentioned that police are effective, we don't need vigilantes, and then you said, well, here's how they supplement. You made your point, but you just did not connect it with what the other side was saying. So I drew the line, but you should have as well. That's all. And then we heard about SOPA, and we heard about Anonymous again, another thing we didn't hear about until very late in both speakers' speech. So from argument side, the opposition takes this one, and entirely because of the seconder for the opposition. Content. Lots of good content, lots of examples. Boston bombing, Facebook, the Oxford Institute, G20, R versus, I didn't get the full name, but there was a case in there. I like case histories. Opposition, we got Reddit, and Reddit again from the opposition seconder. We talked about Snowden. Both members talked about Snowden. New York Post, SOPA, Anonymous again. Lots of good, solid examples connecting both cases, purely based on being able to connect those concrete examples directly to your arguments. The opposition took this one as well, simply because I thought the examples were better placed. Rebuttal and refutation is the next pillar I'm going to talk about, and because in a parliamentary debate we don't have an opportunity to give the Prime Minister any score for rebuttal or refutation, that rested entirely on the government seconder. And in much the same way I'm criticizing the leader of the opposition for having his debate full of rebuttals and then only having 1 point, I would make the same criticism of the opposition, the leader the government seconder, because the rebuttals took about 40, maybe 30 seconds, and I thought they were very vague and they didn't connect to anything. So you had a lot of time to build up your arguments, but the arguments that the other side made were were left out. And I think I wrote down a couple things here. I heard they were more assertions than actual rebuttals. You did support your teammate by mentioning his points again, but something I wrote down here, one of your rebuttals consisted entirely of, "We do think it is forever," and then left that. So that's not really a rebuttal, it's more of a statement. So I couldn't really do anything with that. You're helping your argument, you're helping your teamwork score by supporting that point, but it wasn't concrete or connected to anything. And going over to the opposition side, lots of strong rebuttals from the opposition leader. So this is where I get to give you your points, because you spent so much time on these rebuttals. Lots of rebuttals. I think I counted 5, maybe 6, and they connected very, very well. You had the imperative issue is something I really wanted to get to, like the cat is being tortured right now, and your rebuttals were very strong. They were gripping. And over to the opposition seconder, lots of good rebuttals. Not as many as your leader, but that meant that you had more time for arguments, so it was more balanced. And again, just talking about, I wish you'd made more of those connections when it looked like what you're saying directly confronted what what government was saying. So so in terms of rebuttals, the opposition has to take it, because there's nowhere for me to get the score from the government on that one. Quickly, I'm going to talk about the teamwork and the style. So for teamwork, actually this was a fun comparison for me in terms of teamwork, because both sides had different ways of demonstrating teamwork. For teamwork, the Prime Minister set up a very strong, rigid structure, and the seconder fit into that structure well, but the concrete actual support was kind of missing from the teamwork on that side. So a great effort, but the follow-through wasn't quite there. And from the opposition side, the teamwork's much more nuanced. We heard about the same kinds of arguments. We heard about the Reddit example used in different ways. We heard about the Edward Snowden argument, again used in different ways. So the teamwork was there, but more nuanced. So on this one, the opposition takes the teamwork score as well. I'll take a second to talk about style of each debater. Dean, Prime Minister, spot on. I could not fault you for that style. Clear, concise, easy to understand. And for the government seconder, I'll just make a couple of comments. I heard statements like wrongs and stuff, and that doesn't sit well with me. I want to hear more of a solid example. And I think enunciation and pacing and flow could just use a little bit more practice, and that comes from practice. And moving over to the opposition side, Adrian, I had to take a point off of you for misquoting Spock. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. But otherwise, I thought that was a great presentation, and it was clear. I heard you say once. I can't really take any points off of that, but I heard you say once. And opposition seconder, in terms of style, you were very clear. You were very confident, and I loved when you would say rebuttal, pause, and hang there for a moment, and it was excellent. So that was wonderful. And in fact, because of that style, and because of your nuanced use of adding the teamwork in, and because of your rebuttals and your great arguments and your nice balanced use of time, you get Best Speaker for tonight. And the final score, the opposition has taken the debate with a score of 63 versus 37 for the government. So if I could see the leader of the opposition for the Adjudicator's Cup. Thank you very much. Madam Speaker.
I'm so glad the vote was not equal between the two, because really it would have been very hard for me to choose. Fortunately, there is a clear rendition of the popular vote, and there were 3 votes in favor of the government and 9 votes in favor of the opposition, and therefore declare the motion defeated.